I want the world to understand that everything I said during the trial was intentional. I took an oath to tell the truth, and that's exactly what I did. It doesn't matter who misunderstood me. What matters is that I stood by my word.
The courtroom was a pressure cooker of tension, the kind that builds slowly over time until it threatens to explode. Cameras hovered outside like drones waiting for their next target, capturing every detail, every glance exchanged between lawyers, every whispered conversation between reporters, every nervous breath from onlookers who had gathered to witness what might be one of the most explosive moments in music history. Inside, the trial was no longer just about legalities or financial settlements. It had become a reckoning, a moment where power, fame, and truth collided under the cold glare of justice. Diddy Sean Combs stood at the center of it all, his name etched into the annals of hip-hop as one of its most influential figures. A man who built empires out of beats, fashion, and business acumen, he had long been seen as untouchable, a kingmaker whose reach extended far beyond music. But now, he faced something far more dangerous than any rival label or industry feud exposure. And not just from any corner of the world, but from people who once stood beside him, worked with him, even trusted him. Kid Cudi was first to take the stand, and when he did, the room collectively leaned in. The artist known for turning pain into poetry, for giving voice to the broken, anxious, and searching, was now stepping into a different kind of spotlight. His testimony wasn't delivered with bravado or theatrics. It was quiet, measured, raw. He spoke of late nights in studios, of moments backstage, of conversations that should have stayed private. He didn't scream accusations, he let the facts speak for themselves, and they were damning enough. Then came Jaguar Wright, a woman who had spent years navigating the treacherous waters of the music industry, often overlooked despite her undeniable talent. Her arrival in court was met with murmurs, some curious, some wary. She had always been outspoken, unafraid to challenge the status quo, and now she was doing so in front of a judge, jury, and millions watching from home. Her words carried weight, each sentence laced with the kind of honesty that comes only after years of silence. She described scenes that sounded ripped from the pages of a Hollywood thriller, parties where lines were blurred, relationships where control was everything, and an industry that thrived on keeping secrets buried. Bryshere Yaz Gray followed, bringing with him the aura of someone who had lived through both the glamour and the wreckage of fame. Best known for his role as Hakeem Lion on Empire, a character defined by ambition and excess, Gray's real-life experiences seemed eerily similar. He spoke of mentorship that turned into manipulation, of opportunities that came with strings attached, of moments where he felt powerful and others where he felt powerless. His testimony was emotional, sometimes shaky but never uncertain. He wasn't here to seek revenge or settle scores. He was here to tell the truth. As the days passed and more testimonies unfolded, the narrative became clearer. This wasn't just about Diddy. It was about an entire system, one built on influence, privilege, and the silencing of voices that dared to speak up. The courtroom had become a battleground, not just for legal outcomes, but for cultural accountability. Artists, fans, journalists, and everyday people watched with bated breath, knowing that whatever happened here would ripple far beyond the walls of the courthouse. Social media exploded with reactions. Some defended Diddy, citing his contributions to music and culture, while others praised those who came forward, calling them brave and necessary. Conspiracy theories ran rampant. Was this part of a larger scheme? Was this payback for old grudges? Was there more to the story? Theories swirled, but one thing remained constant: the sheer gravity of what was unfolding. Inside the courtroom, the energy was palpable. Lawyers argued fiercely, jurors took notes diligently, and the judge maintained strict control over proceedings. Reporters scribbled furiously, trying to capture every nuance, every inflection, every pause that could hint at deeper truths. Outside, protesters gathered, holding signs demanding justice, accountability, and transparency. The world was watching, and it wasn't going to look away. The trial continued, day after day, peeling back layers of a story that had been hidden for too long. More witnesses took the stand, more documents were entered into evidence, and more questions arose than answers. But one thing was clear: the foundation of an empire was cracking, and the people who once benefited from its power were now exposing its flaws. For Kid Cudi, Jaguar Wright, and Bryshere, this wasn't just about legal proceedings. It was deeply personal. Each of them had lived through moments that shaped their careers, their mental health, and their understanding of the world around them. Now they had chosen to step forward, knowing full well the risks involved. Their decision to testify wasn't made lightly. It was the result of years of reflection, of conversations with loved ones, of a desire to protect others from suffering the same fate. And as the trial moved forward, their words continued to echo beyond the walls of the courtroom. They weren't just telling their own stories. They were giving voice to countless others who had remained silent for too long. In doing so, they had done something remarkable. They had reminded the world that even the most powerful figures can be held accountable, and that sometimes the loudest truths come from the most unexpected places. As the final days of the trial approached, the tension reached a fever pitch. Witnesses gave their last statements, attorneys made their closing arguments, and the jury prepared to deliberate. The air inside the courtroom was thick with anticipation, with the knowledge that whatever verdict was reached would send shockwaves across the entertainment industry. When the gavel finally fell, and the verdict was read, gasps filled the room, emotions erupted: relief, anger, disbelief. Justice had been served, or had it? That question would linger long after the trial ended, debated in newsrooms, living rooms, and online forums. But regardless of the outcome, one thing was certain: the music industry would never be the same again. The curtain had been pulled back, the mask had been removed, and the truth, however painful, had been spoken aloud. As the courtroom emptied and the reporters rushed to file their stories, one thought lingered in the air: this wasn't the end, it was only the beginning. The trial of Sean Diddy Combs had begun as a legal proceeding, but it quickly evolved into something much bigger, a cultural reckoning that forced the entertainment industry to confront its darkest corners. At the heart of it all were three individuals, whose testimonies would shape the narrative for years to come: Kid Cudi, Jaguar Wright, and Bryshere. Kid Cudi, the artist who had long been celebrated for his vulnerability and emotional depth, stepped onto the witness stand with a quiet strength that belied the weight of his words. His music had always been a refuge for those struggling with anxiety, depression, and existential crises, and now he was using his voice in a different way, by speaking openly about his experiences in the music industry. He didn't sensationalize his testimony. Instead, he laid out the facts with precision, detailing moments that many in the audience found hard to believe. He spoke of mentorship that crossed ethical boundaries, of late-night gatherings, where things went too far, and of decisions he regretted making under pressure. His testimony was especially significant because of who he was: not just an artist, but a symbol of emotional honesty in a genre that often glorified bravado and toughness. For years, Cudi had been open about his struggles with mental health, and now he was showing that even the most emotionally aware individuals could be vulnerable to exploitation. His words resonated not just with fans, but with anyone who had ever felt powerless in the face of authority. Jaguar Wright, on the other hand, brought a different kind of energy to the courtroom. Known for her soulful voice and unapologetic personality, she had spent years navigating the highs and lows of the music industry, often overshadowed by bigger names despite her undeniable talent. Now standing under oath, she was no longer willing to stay silent. Her testimony was raw, unfiltered, and filled with the kind of honesty that came from years of pent-up frustration. She spoke of parties where power dynamics left people vulnerable, of relationships built on manipulation rather than mutual respect, and of an industry that thrived on secrecy. Her words painted a picture of a world where success often came at a steep cost, and where artists, especially women, were expected to trade pieces of themselves for opportunity. She didn't hold back, and in doing so, she shattered the illusion that success in music always came with integrity. Bryshere's presence in the courtroom was perhaps the most unexpected of all. Known primarily for his role as Hakeem Lion on Empire, a character who embodied excess and ambition, Gray's own journey mirrored some of the show's themes. He had faced his own battles, legal troubles, mental health struggles, and a career that had seen its share of peaks and valleys. Now he stood in a different kind of spotlight, recounting moments that many in the audience found hard to believe. His testimony was emotional, sometimes shaky, but never uncertain. He spoke of mentorship that turned into manipulation, of opportunities that came with strings attached, of moments where he felt powerful, and others where he felt powerless. His words carried weight, each sentence laced with the kind of honesty that comes only after years of silence. He wasn't here to seek revenge or settle scores. He was here to tell the truth. Together, these three individuals formed a powerful trio of voices that challenged the very foundations of an industry built on image and influence. Their testimonies weren't just about Diddy. They were about a system that allowed abuse to flourish under the guise of mentorship, friendship, and opportunity. They were about the price of silence, the courage it takes to speak up, and the impact that truth can have when it is finally allowed to surface. As the trial progressed, the public's reaction grew increasingly polarized. Some praised the bravery of the witnesses, calling them trailblazers who had opened the door for others to come forward. Others questioned their motives, suggesting that the trial was nothing more than a publicity stunt or a vendetta against a man who had helped launch countless careers. The conspiracy theories multiplied, fueled by social media speculation and tabloid headlines. But amidst the noise, one thing remained clear: the trial had exposed cracks in a system that had long gone unchecked. It had given a platform to those who had once been ignored, and it had forced the industry to confront uncomfortable truths about itself. Whether justice was ultimately served or not, the damage had already been done, the veil had been lifted, and the world was watching. In the days following the testimonies, the conversation expanded beyond the courtroom. Artists, activists, and everyday people weighed in, debating the ethics of fame, the responsibilities of power, and the price of silence. Some argued that this was just the beginning, that more stories would emerge, more names would be called, and more institutions would be forced to reckon with their pasts. Others feared retaliation, worried that speaking out could lead to professional ruin or worse. But regardless of where people stood, one thing was certain: the trial had ignited a fire that wouldn't be easily extinguished. It had exposed cracks in a system that had long gone unchecked, and it had given a platform to those who had once been ignored. Whether justice would be served remained to be seen, but the conversation had already begun, and it wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. For Kid Cudi, Jaguar Wright, and Bryshere, the experience was deeply personal. Each of them had lived through moments that shaped their careers, their relationships, and their understanding of the world around them. Now they had chosen to step forward, knowing full well the risks involved. Their decision to testify wasn't made lightly. It was the result of years of reflection, of conversations with loved ones, of a desire to protect others from suffering the same fate. And as the trial moved forward, their words continued to echo beyond the walls of the courtroom. They weren't just telling their own stories, they were giving voice to countless others who had remained silent for too long. In doing so, they had done something remarkable. They had reminded the world that even the most powerful figures can be held accountable, and that sometimes the loudest truths come from the most unexpected places. The courtroom remained tense, the stakes higher than ever. Witnesses continued to take the stand, lawyers continued to argue their cases, and the public continued to watch, waiting for the final verdict. But no matter how the trial ended, one thing was certain: the music industry would never be the same again. The curtain had been pulled back, the mask had been removed, and the truth, however painful, was finally being spoken aloud. As the sun set over the city, casting long shadows across the courthouse steps, the world braced itself for what was still to come. The trial wasn't just about Diddy anymore, it was about justice, about responsibility, about the power of storytelling. And in the end, it was about reclaiming narratives that had been stolen, silenced, or rewritten for far too long. Inside the courtroom, the judge gave the final instructions to the jury. Outside, the crowd pressed closer, phones raised high, capturing every second. The attorneys delivered their closing arguments, each side making their final plea, and then silence. The jury filed out, deliberation began, and the world waited. Days passed, rumors spread, speculation ran wild, and then finally the moment arrived. The verdict was read. Gasps filled the room, emotions erupted, and the gavel fell. Justice had been served, or had it? No matter the outcome, one thing was clear: this trial had changed everything. The music industry would have to answer for its past. The stars who had once been untouchable were now vulnerable, and the people who had suffered in silence had found their voices. As the courtroom emptied and the reporters rushed to file their stories, one thought lingered in the air: this wasn't the end, it was only the beginning.